What is up, people of the internet? It is Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from San Francisco quintet, Deafheaven. The band's new album, Lonely People with Power, will be released on March 28th via Roadrunner Records. Originally formed in San Fran, Deafheaven is comprised of vocalist George Clark.
As if you are in a position to shorten it. San Francisco. Come on, give it its full name.
San
If you are
Fran.
going to San Francisco, please remember to wear flowers in your hair, Dave.
I think people know what San Fran means, Duncan. I
don't know if they do. Could be like a sandwich. I have the San Fran. Side of fries. This is derailed very quickly. Let's get this back on track. Right?
I'd order that.
A serious review. This one will get traction. People will lay their eyes on this because, unlike quite a lot of our reviews, this band's popular. So some people might check it out.
Okay, so if that's the case, they already know who's in the band. I'm not even going to tell you that again. The band gained widespread acclaim for their groundbreaking 2013 album, Sunbather, which redefined the margins of heavy music, earning esteemed spots on Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Metal Albums of All Time and Pitchfork's 200 Best Albums of the 2010s.
Metallica's load is on both those lists, I'm sure, which kind of diminishes it a little bit, but well, hey, even a broken clock can be right twice a day.
Deafheaven again challenged genre conventions on 2015's New Bermuda, earning widespread acclaim, while their 2018 LP Ordinary Corrupt Human Love garnered the band their first ever Grammy nomination in the Best Metal Performance field. Always moving forward, the band's 2021 album Infinite Granite continued their evolution and galvanised with a refinement pointed at lusher textures and lilting melodies. Lonely People with Power was recorded with producer Justin Meldal Johnson, mixed by Zach Weeks of God City Studio, and sees Deafheaven again confound expectations, piling element on element and towering towards the sky with their most ambitious release yet. Tracked at East West Studios, Lonely People with Power includes additional vocal contributions from Jay Matthews of Boy Harsher and Paul Banks of Interpol. So, Deafheaven, Duncan. We've recently just spoken about one of their albums on a recent Tech Metal Epidemic review.
Oh, cross promotion! Look how he did that. As if it was fucking nothing.
Check that out if you want to hear about some cool headphones. We spoke quite a bit about Sunbather on that review. We also reviewed the last Deafheaven album, Infinite Granite, which we both loved. And I've managed to now see them twice live.
Yes. Saw them twice live in the space of a year and a half.
Yes.
It's pretty good going.
Both times they stole the show. So I think what I'm trying to say here is Lonely People with Power was an album we were both excited to hear.
Yeah, it's hard to contextualize now because the kind of the Blackgaze genre is now pretty big. It's safe to say there's a lot of bands doing it or dabbling with it. And whilst it's not fair to say that Deafheaven were the originators of that sound, there were certainly other black metal bands that experimented in atmosphere. It's hard to argue that they aren't probably of that genre the most important band. When you chart things back, there is a sea change shift in sounds after Sunbather comes out.
Yeah, and I think if you look at their back catalogue, they're a band that very rarely drop the ball.
No, never really.
Even and I know that the previous album may have turned some fans away.
Just people can get to fuck because Infinite Granite got a 5 from me. I think it's fucking great.
Yeah. But yeah, for me, it just opened the door for more possibilities, newer possibilities.
Yeah. Also, when bands they fully committed to that.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? They didn't there's maybe 2 screams on the entire album.
I know.
They fully committed it, and you know what's even more sickening is how good they are.
Yeah.
At that sort of genre, they just knocked it out the park with what felt like relative ease. Signed to Roadrunner now, which is an interesting choice.
Yep.
Runner have lost what would have been in the last decade anyway. Roadrunner has kind of slipped down the slippery pole of kind of prominence.
Yeah.
Which was like record labels do that from time to time. They grow, they expand to huge levels and then they shrink again.
Yep.
But they lost some like big names. And rather than try and just acquire huge commercial bands, part of me kind of respects the game of let's get Deafheaven in. Let's invest our time in a band that you could argue is on the more extreme side of bands that you've ever really had on their label, and that's including bands like Deicide and stuff like that, which were like full on kind of death metal. The kind of blackened side of this, they haven't really had many bands that push that level of extremity out there. So it's an interesting acquisition, is what I'm trying to say.
It was, and I was unsure like which direction they were going to go. What version of?
Did you only sign them because of Infinite Granite?
Yeah.
Or had you listened to the rest? So,
I was curious as to where they were going to go on this album. We then reacted to Magnolia.
Yes, which was not like Infinite Granite.
No, and you could have been mistaken for thinking like Deafheaven have returned to their roots and done like a 180 on Infinite Granite. But we also said after that reaction that knowing Deafheaven, it probably wasn't going to be a full album of that.
Yeah.
If their last album showed anything, it was they don't really do predictable.
Yep.
I mean, and we were kind of right. Like this isn't an album full of Magnolias.
You didn't listen to Heathen, did you?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
No, so I had listened to Heathen. So I like Heathen has those kind of more melancholic moments, kind of shoegaze elements in there. So I was coming out of this going like that. Right, I'm unsure if we're going to get actual singing vocals.
Yeah.
But I know one thing: we're not like leaving all that stuff behind. You are right. I would, if I had to categorize this album, I would say that this album is the connective tissue that pretty much weaves our entire back catalogue together. It's so bizarre. Like they've somehow managed to take all those moments in time and create an album that seems to encapsulate them all into one cohesive sound while still adding more stuff in. So it's not like, let's look back over the last decade and pat ourselves on the back. It's, let's look over like the past decade, see how we've kind of charted our course, almost pay homage to that, but with a clear eye forward. Like at the end of this album, I was even more excited for what's next.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean. We'll get into more details to kind of justify it, but like they are a remarkable band. Whichever way you look at it, they are a band who are often emulated, but never really. Even the bands that emulate them don't seem to be able to do what it is that they managed to do in a recording.
Yeah.
So, well, I think with that, Dave, did we talk about the album?
I think we should.
Talk about the album.
I think we should. Do you want to go? You want me to go? How do you want to do this?
I will let you have the floor, Dave, because only one of us has Sunbather on vinyl. I think that technically means that you are a bigger fan, but also means that I have a bigger penis. So, I think that's
I'll take the Sunbather vinyl over that.
What's a few inches between friends? How did you like? You were into Deafheaven before I was into Deafheaven. You were early on that Sunbather bandwagon, like right when it came out. So how is this one stacking up for you, big man?
Yeah. When I heard Magnolia, I was like, okay, this is more black than gaze, if that makes sense. It definitely, you could hear that more like traditional, almost kind of Norwegian black metal kind of side coming through. There's a lot of it is quite traditional in the guitar work. But the more I listened to it, that went back and listened to that single, I could hear kind of similarities to Black Brick, the track Black Brick, which they played live when the last time we saw them, which was amazing. But that was like a kind of outtake from Ordinary Corrupt Human Love. It was like a standalone single, and also has some of that kind of like, you can hear some of that Norwegian kind of inspiration coming through on it as well. And I can see why they released that as a standalone single, because I'm not 100% sure it would have like neatly slotted into that album, which is kind of interesting, because if I had to match the, I don't know, the clean / unclean kind of contrast on this album to another of their back catalogue, I'd say it's probably closest to Ordinary Corrupt Human Love. It was the album that they started to expand. Like that was the moment where things started to kind of take a change, and Lonely People with Power has that kind of type of blend to it, but at the same time it captures, as you said, kind of certain snapshots from the band's like last 15 years they've been on the go, something like that, and it kind of just kind of scatters them throughout this release. And although it does remind me of the kind of Ordinary Corrupt Human Love, kind of the balance of that album is not the same album. It doesn't follow the same album structure or anything like that. Ordinary Corrupt Human Love didn't really have like interludes as such.
Yes.
It had kind of shorter tracks that were stripped back and clean, whereas Lonely People with Power has this kind of 3-track incidental series, I suppose, that serves as interludes throughout the album, and lead into some of the album's kind of biggest tracks. And I think those tracks are pivotal. They are kind of perfectly placed to give you a different tone, a different headspace, and a different kind of texture throughout the album. The first one, which is the first track on the album, leads into Doberman, which is like track 2. And it was a track that we'd kind of like, when we saw the track listen, and we're like, oh, Doberman. Wow.
Better come with teeth.
Yeah, for sure. And it is a bit of a kind of like album tone setter, that track. It's got that like kind of charred, blackened character, but also has little bits of melody in the guitars that kind of make it feel grand and kind of ethereal at the same time. Not a typically fast track either, although it does have some blast beats in it and some kind of grindier riffs. But they save that slightly more intense delivery for the following track, which is Magnolia, and the first single they released. After that, though, the Garden Route starts to...
Oh, that track, by the way, boner-making material.
Yeah. It starts to plant some...
what?
Infinite granite seeds into the blackened soil.
But he's just like mixing metaphors. He's just confusing everyone. No one knows what they're doing now.
I don't know why I'm continuing down this garden path, Duncan, but stick with me here. It has predominantly kind of clean guitar work for the first couple of minutes, kind of post-rock kind of leads in the background, before it then erupts into kind of more of what we got on Doberman, that kind of like nasty, kind of slow to mid-paced kind of like Venom, but the slower stuff sounds great on this album. I love it when they drive home those big chords with the soaring leads in the background, and George just like wailing over the top of it. Speaking of which, no clean vocals just yet.
Yeah, the Garden Route, for all that Dave has described there about clean sounds, it is the most scorched earth blackened vocals you're ever going to fucking do, which kind of makes the song sound even better. If I'm being honest, it just fucking works so well.
That is until track 5, Heathen. Yeah. Again, like, I hadn't heard this track, I hadn't listened to the single, I was holding off to listen to the whole album, but like, perfect placement for this track, comes in just at the right time, where that switch from the kind of black metal scream is exactly what's needed. And the track itself kind of gave me like almost like Infinite Granite meets like New Bermuda kind of type feel. And that kind of links up perfectly with what they do on Amethyst, which is more kind of lush and like post-rock textures and in the first half anyway, and then it kind of bursts into this like wave of Blackgaze in the second half, which has some... That track is awesome. Like, has some really cool moments from a drumming perspective from Daniel Tracy, who, for me, like, I think he absolutely kills it on this album as a whole.
He's an understated drummer as well.
For sure.
For someone that kind of It's easy to sleep on what he adds in Infinite Granite, but it's also easy to sleep on his playing in earlier albums as well as just a guy that does blast beats.
So, like, his playing is so, like, silky. Like, he just seems to just flow right around the kit. But he adds a really nice kind of, like, tact to the album, and there's some really kind of huge moments drumming-wise on the album, which I just absolutely adored.
So what we're saying as well, if you are closing out this section from Incidental 1 to Incidental 2. This closes out in the longest song. So Amethyst is it's like well over 8 minutes. So.
Yeah. Then you have obviously the incidental installment again, number 2, which kind of leans more into like an almost. I kept getting this kind of like Cult of Luna kind of like industrial type character. When I listened to it,
he brought the once again applaud them because this is the smartest fucking thing to do ever. The Incidental 2 and Incidental 3 are the tracks that have the guest vocals on.
Yeah.
So they're not on tracks which you would imagine they are likely to play live.
No, not at all.
So it's so fucking clever.
Yeah, and that second incidental track has Jake Matthews on it from Boy Hersher.
Yeah.
And he has like a completely different vocal style to it before it gets like really kind of like apocalyptic towards the end of the track. The second half of the album doesn't necessarily delve into anything majorly different from the first. It just kind of like embellishes and develops on a lot of the ideas and elements they've put across already. But there are some huge highlights in the second half of this album. Revelator could be the most ferocious track on the album, and those kind of traditional black metal traits really shine through on this track. Body Behavior has this one had a bit more of a kind of like almost kind of post-punk kind of style and the tempo and the rhythm. Some of the more kind of like echoey kind of guitar work, but it still has like those moments of fury kind of coming through as well.
Those echoey guitars, very Interpol.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because the following track, guest appearance from the dude from Interpol.
Yeah.
What are we doing? It's like it's all coming together.
I think Winona might be the track that kind of grabbed me the most on this album. It's like about 7.5 minutes. But that one really, like, there's a real kind of like journey kind of feel to it. It's got a bit of everything from all their albums where you can hear echoes of like Sunbather and Infinite Granite and New Bermuda. And then the Marvelous Orange Tree ends with probably the biggest kind of emotional delivery of the album. That mixture of black metal screams and clean vocals together was like a combo we didn't know we needed, but it's so good. Like when the two styles come together, it's great. His vocal on the album is incredible.
Impeccable,
and like just unbelievable delivery. His tone is just fucking vicious. I don't know if this track was a reference to Sunbather, because that Sunbather closes with a track called the Pecan Tree, or Pecan Tree, however I pronounce that.
There's Americans angrily giving you an answer right now, Dave.
And this track is obviously called The Marvelous Orange Tree. So I don't know if there's some sort of linkage there between the two tracks. There's some melodies in the clean parts of both songs which I felt sounded similar. So I might be totally wrong in this, but I felt like it was kind of pointing that way, where the two were maybe kind of connected in some type of way. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, when I got through this, like I had my hopes set like really high on this one. Like I was like, I love this band, and they've done some incredible stuff in the past. And I thought like this could be another home run for the band. And I was kind of like hoping for that. Like I hope this is going to just like sweep me off my feet like Sunbather did. And I was like, maybe that's a bit unfair, because like Sunbather is, for me, is a perfect album. Like I have no like issues. It's flawless for me.
Also, your reference points for Sunbather are bands and Sims that don't sound anything like Sunbather.
Yeah.
Like I love the kind of blackened element they're bringing here, but you're not like referencing like a band that's released an album that sounds like that.
Yeah.
So the problem with being so, and we talk about this all the time, like Gojira to me will always be the band that released maybe the best progressive death metal album ever, and From Mars to Sirius, which they will never top because it is so ahead of its time. It's so monumental. that they can go off and do lots of different things, but nothing sounded like that before. Nothing has sounded like that since. Sunbather's kind of like that as well. And for a band that's kind of got that albatross around their neck, I kind of enjoy the fact that they've never really, they reference it, but they've never been like, let's make Sunbather Part 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think to expect another one of those was going to be a big ask. And to be honest, it's difficult to compare to Sunbather. It's especially difficult to compare to Infinite Granite because it's a totally different sounding album.
They did that again.
This is an album that takes pieces from all the releases over the last 10, 15 years and brings them all cohesively into one album. I don't think it hit me as hard as some of those releases did on first listen. So I'd say, like, give this album more time. I felt like when I got into listens 3 and 4, I felt like the album started to grow on me like much more, became more memorable and more rewarding the more I listened to it. I think this is on par with Infinite Granite, quality wise, not in style obviously, but in terms of how much I liked it. And I really liked Infinite Granite. What about yourself? What did you think of Lonely People with Power?
So yeah, like any slight concern we had that maybe signing to a large record label may dull their sound was very, very, very quickly removed. Upon just Doberman, I was like, all right, we're like, I know what's going on here, and I didn't. That was the beauty of it. The thing I love about this album is the flow of this album, and this is an album that really languishes in long form tracks, right? So. That second track is over 6.5 minutes long. The fourth track is over 5 minutes long. Track 6 over 8 minutes long. And then in the back half, it doesn't really stop there either. Revelator is almost 6.5 minutes. Body Behavior is almost 5.5 minutes. And Winona is 7.5 minutes. So it's an album that comfortably languishes in its atmosphere.
Yeah.
Which it should. Like, there are few bands that manage to paint that that tapestry of atmosphere in the same way a band like Deafheaven do. I also, I can't stress how much I was in on Infinite Granite. It's one of my favourite albums of the year. And I loved it because I thought, like I said before, it was a big swing. Yeah. And to me, it connected. And I know a lot of people felt they had sold out, question mark. I don't know how you can accuse a band, an album that even sounds like Infinite Granite, where the songs were all over 5 minutes long and not radio friendly at all, when you're thinking about what can be played, as selling out. As if people aren't going to be like, the guys that released Sunbather? You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't getting a ton of radio play, let's put it that way. So it's a stupid fucking argument, right? Bands like that have atmosphere should be allowed to. Bands some bands are a lot like painters, right? And when they find a new color, that color tends to get used quite a lot. And this is my new favorite color, and I'm just going to try and incorporate it everywhere through it. Like Deafheaven are a band like that for me. That when they find a particular tone or atmosphere or musical color. Yeah. I think it then becomes a predominant feature in their album. Infinite Granite is the great example of that, in that all the colours of that artwork, that blues and dark blues and kind of like kind of almost industrial whites, are all the way through the album. It sounds very spacey and very atmospheric. So the concern was, how far do we stray away from that? And they have strayed away from it, but the connective tissue is all the way through this, in the guitar work predominantly, but in the atmosphere as well. It is incredibly well produced. This is one of these ones where this, to me, is the argument against any person that says black metal should be lo-fi and inaudible. Is like, this sounds savage as fuck and heavy as fuck, and I can make out everything everyone's doing. So, I mean, there's your evidence right there. Yeah. To me, I thought it opened really, really, really strong. Doberman and Magnolia is that kind of building up. When the Garden Route hit the first time, I was kind of floored. I think that song is one of the strongest on the album, just in terms of its sound and its composition. Amethyst is a highlight as well. Like, once again, nice long form track with lots of weaving movements and moments. The back half I slept on my first listen, if I'm honest. Right. So once I got through Incidental 2, and Revelator punished me into fucking dust. I don't know if it was I was still in the fever of the first half, but the back half I was like, right, cool, right, a solid back half, maybe not as remarkable as the first. Over subsequent listens, I've almost 180'd that now.
Yeah.
I think the back half is where the band are like, this is us. If the front half of that album is them hitting all the high points of their career, the back half of the album is where I think they start to weave in all the Sims together, but start to build out new ideas, specifically in tone and kind of this tactile nature of the music. Winona is a great example of that. It feels like a 2025 Deafheaven track to me. It just like feels like the band kind of almost signaling this is kind of what you should expect from us moving forward. Not that we'll ever be able to predict what a Deafheaven album sounds like. Guest appearances, like I mentioned before, love the placement of them on these kind of interlude tracks. Even though Incidental 2 is a track, and Incidental 3 is a track, they are connective parts. Interestingly enough, I never listened to hear if there was any commonality between part 1, part 2, and 3 in terms of motifs or whatnot. All I know is Incidental 3 is fucking brilliant, and I did not know I need Interpol cover album by Dave. I should have. Infinite Granite kind of touches on it a little bit, but it's really, really smart. I love how they front load it with the kind of the calm and the atmosphere and all the rest, and then the savagery comes in right at the end, and it's that juxtaposition like they do on the Marvelous Orange Tree, where you get those two tones together, and it's like a revelation. It just opens the entire sound up. So yeah, I was more caught off by just how, once again, mature this Sims. They've always had that they always sound a lot more measured than I think people give them credit for. I thought the musicianship was fucking phenomenal, but the flow in this album is impeccable. Just like really, really, really good. And you are right, it rewards on subsequent listens. I did 4 in this in total. And all those, like by the 4th listen, I loved it even more than I did on the first listen. So, and I can't imagine for 1 second that's going to stop, which is interesting because the first time I heard Sunbather, I was in, like, you've been chatting about it for years, and I finally sat down and gave it its day in court, and I was like, oh, this is fucking absolutely incredible. Like, just like absolute masterpiece. Infinite Granite was the same. Every other album they've released, I've found, has only benefited by time.
Yeah.
Like, I like them, but the more I come back to them over time, the more I'm like, this is just so much smarter than I gave it credit for, or, you know, it really grown on me, or actually they were maybe just a little bit ahead of their time with their sound, but now it just feels like it's rooted in and it's really, really, really good.
Yeah.
Lonely People with Power, I think, is an example of kind of, it's an exercise, I think, in one, bringing some people back into the fold, maybe. Not that I necessarily think, we saw them live and people could not give a fuck. They were like causing anarchy. But I kind of feel there's an exercise in here of, we're not a different band, we're the same band. So there's a bit of that bringing people back in. But I don't think that's from a commercial point of view. I think that's more artistically, they've done that chapter now, and now they're kind of seeing where it goes next. I think that the other exercise is that I think they've released something that Roadrunner Records will be immensely happy to put behind it, because this feels commercial without being commercial. Like it's like a weird compromise from a band perspective. The band will be loving that they've managed to get this out on Roadrunner Records, and I also feel that Roadrunner Records will be loving for the fact that they can put this out on their record label. It kind of, like I mentioned before, it's one of the more extreme things this label has been put out without being the heaviest thing this label has put out.
Yeah.
It kind of straddles that level of kind of extreme in a really interesting way. And the last point I'd mention about it is I personally think from a musicianship point of view, this is the best musicianship the band has had. I feel the control over the guitars between the quiet, atmospheric and clean moments and those kind of blackened riffs are at their most comfortable.
Yeah.
I felt the drumming on this was absolutely phenomenal, and like this is, in my opinion, from a black metal point of view, the strongest the vocals have ever been. It just feels like everything is fit into place.
Yeah.
It is an incredibly good album. Is it their best album? Ask me in 13 years. Oh, you know what I mean? That's kind of how I feel about this one. I think, given time, I could see me coming back to this maybe more than I do Infinite Granite, which is interesting because Infinite Granite for me, Sunbather's the top, but Infinite Granite is right behind it for me because of the different sound. I think because this kind of straddles between those two sounds, you know, like the order I would now listen to those albums is whatever the first one is, this is the middle one, and then the other one comes after.
Yeah.
Just by virtue. So yeah, I think time will only be kind to this by the end of the year for me, but this is scoring very high. So
okay, so let's do that. Scores for Lonely People with Power is a difficult one to slap a score on, just considering what they've done prior to this. I agree with you. I think Sunbather is still like my holy grail. I think that's just
unreal. It's like it's unfair for it to be so early in a band's career. Like it really is.
I also love Ordinary Corrupt Human Love as well. I think that's an incredible album as well. And Infinite Granite was totally different, but I loved it all the same. I think it's very close to those other albums, to Infinite Granite and Ordinary Corrupt Human Love. So I'm going to go... I mean, the score could change. My score could go up on this one over time, but I'm going to go 4.5 on it right now. What are you thinking?
I'm a 5. Yeah, like there's no like the only thing that will change is, like I say, its position on like to me personally. Deafheaven before this had 2 5-star albums.
Yeah.
This is their third for me. The rest are all like, interestingly enough, the rest are 4.5s and 4s. So it's not as if like there's this is a black stain. Like there's not like that at all.
Yeah.
But like you can hear where sometimes they've tried something that hasn't quite resonated the same way, or they played it a tiny little bit safer than maybe they should have.
Yeah.
And this is not a safe album by any stretch of the imagination. This is an album that kind of dares to be everything to everyone whilst retaining something of them.
Yeah.
Which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. It's almost easier to rip it all up and try and create a brand new sound and fail at it than it is to weave the tapestry of their entire 15 years as a band together in one album. And I think they've done it. So it's a 5 from me.
Nice. Deafheaven, Lonely People with Power, out on March 28th via Roadrunner Records. Links below to the band, pre-order, single. Check it out, have a listen, see what you think. Happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it, let us know. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.